Welcome to the Nuclear Power Institute's The Path of Most Persistent podcast. The podcast highlighting individual stories of persistence, community outreach, and inspiration to support the continuing and emerging nuclear science and technology needs across the state of Texas. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Howdy, and welcome to another episode of the Path of Most Persistence podcast. Today, we are honored and grateful to have Interim President Dr. John Junkins with us. So Dr. Junkins, thank you so much for joining us today and really appreciate your time. We know that your schedule is very busy, especially during this crisis, as well as the last week of winter apocalypse, as I've been hearing it called, getting everything settled there on campus. So really appreciate your time and thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, Travis.
So to start off, I know that you're the interim president at Texas A&M University. I was wondering if you could give us a little bit more background of what you do here at the university outside of just your president role.
Well, I have two main hats. One of them is Professor John Junkins. I'm a fairly prolific mentor. I've graduated 55 PhDs. I think I hold a national record in aerospace engineering. 26 of my 55 graduates are also professors. So I have 160 descendant PhDs that have flown out of my nest here, which I pride myself on being a great mentor. I'm a problem solver. I try to solve problems, research problems that have I try to have about a 5 or 6 year time constant when the results of the research may actually be applied. That's my goal frequently. My other hat is the director of the Institute for Advanced Study, which was sort of a long-term dream of mine, which I managed to realized that dream about a decade after I initially had it. In the wake of Vision 2020, I proposed, or I asked the question, should we build an Institute for Advanced Study of the type more or less that we ended up building, but it was a decade later, roughly, before I found the resources and the dominoes lined up so that I could actually begin building that institute. And this Institute for Advanced Study, as you know, is a virtual institute, which is really a means for the faculty across the university to dream the impossible dream by answering the following question. If I could have anyone in the world, any superstar in the world in my field, to come for up to 12 months to work with me and my students, who would that be, assuming somebody else will pay for it? So this is the kind of Make-A-Wish Foundation for academic excellence, and its sole goal is to really accelerate the university by connecting our rising stars with the top people in their field. And remarkably, we've brought 80 people so far to campus, and 11 of those have joined our faculty. This has been an incredibly successful venture, and it's something that I will go back to on June 1. And I want it to be sort of from a service point of view, the signature accomplishment of my career. And that includes serving as interim president. This Institute for Advanced Study is forever. It's going to be a ratchet that clicks every year to bring superstar talent to this university. We've managed to attract $40 million of endowment that ensures it's a permanent structural feature of the university.
That's amazing. That program sounds like it's extremely important to the mission of Texas A&M. So that's really amazing that that's in place and how successful it has been. So reading through your CV, it stated that you started your career at NASA at 19, which is pretty impressive on its own. So congratulations there. But I wanted to know, how did you know from such a young age what you wanted to do for a career?
Well, to begin with, I'm the first PhD from my county. And I'm not just a first generation college student. The well-educated of my two parents had a sixth grade education. I'm from Appalachia. If you saw the movie Deliverance, if you haven't, you need to go see it. Those were my people, and they weren't the ones in the canoe. Uh, so my ancestors were of Irish stock, came over from debtor's prison with Oglethorpe to populate the 13th colony. So they were all small farmers, both of my parents. But when you're talking about academic accomplishment, one has to distinguish between ignorance and stupidity. Ignorance is a curable condition. Both of my parents were extraordinarily bright. They raised 5 children, all of whom have gone to higher education, all but one with 2 degrees. The most successful of these 5 children is not me, it's my sister, Faye Gibbons. If you go onto Amazon.com, you will find she has about 30 novels and is in the Literary Hall of Fame. So I followed her footsteps. I was an athlete, or at least I thought I was, in high school. And I was actually not a good student. I wasn't a weak student, but the culture of North Georgia, where I grew up, being a jock was about 2 orders of magnitude more important than socially than being a scholar. So I did not take a high school preparation to be sitting where I am right now. I was offered a scholarship to play at Clemson, and somehow I got the right answer, and my coach helped me with that. I had a great mentor and a coach who had a one-liner that went something like this: John, I don't know what God's plan for you is, but it doesn't have a damn thing to do with your body. It's got something to do with your mind. Go figure it out. And by the way, that's been important to me as a mentor going forward, is we should always strive to recognize the potential in an individual that may have little to do with their current state. Is there a fire in the belly and intellectual horsepower? Those two things, if they're there, then the trajectory that a person can go on is limitless. There's a cultural element of it, and it has to do with work ethic, and there's a moral element of it, being able to find true north, what's important in ethical and other situations. And my parents' cultural wealth was awesome. Together, they never had a 5-digit income, and still they had so much to invest in their children culturally, so that I'm still surfing on a wave that my parents started. And so this is something that first generation students, being in a land grant university presidency, in that sense, I'm ideally qualified because I know what I'm talking about now based on personal experience. So to start with perseverance, as in with the questions you were asking, but somehow perseverance is about ambition, and that fire gets lit or not at some crucial point in your life. Mentors have a lot to do with it. John Kennedy had a lot to do with my fire, because in 1957, Sputnik 1 was launched. I graduated from high school in '61, and so I was fascinated by space. Even though I was playing football, I knew I had some academic hops in there somewhere, because I wasn't having to work very hard to make B pluses, but I wasn't taking the curriculum I should, and I wasn't doing the things I should to prepare. My mother, with her 5th grade education, I was very sage advice that she gave me. After it was clear that when I wasn't playing football, none of the places like Clemson or Georgia Tech or Auburn had any interest in John Junkins, a scholar. They had the meat market interest, but that wasn't, they wanted me to come as an athlete, but when I wasn't going to play football, I wasn't admitted. at Georgia Tech because my scores were low and my curriculum wasn't right. So I went to a four-year college, my first year, Berry College in Rome, Georgia. And there, amazingly, in a very intense year, I took very heavy load, took all of the math that I didn't take in high school, plus calculus and physics and chemistry and college calculus, physics and chemistry, and emerged with good grades. And I transferred to Auburn, where I did well. And in my first, after my first quarter, which was a quarter system then, I went there in fall of 1962. I immediately went to Huntsville, Alabama at age 19 as a co-op student. So basically, in a very short order, I went from being a jock that had no future academically to, as a consequence of really getting my mind right about what I wanted to do and committing to it with every fiber of my being, I was able to, in a very short order, become better than better than average engineering student. I graduated Auburn as the outstanding engineering graduate in 1965. In a total of 8 quarters, I went to my first year, I went to a 4-year, just a Berry College, the first year, and 8 quarters, which is, given that I didn't start off in engineering, I started off in math and physics. It was a pretty good time to get out. Part of that was because I had other motivations. I had met my wife in Huntsville while I was working for NASA, and my wife to be. And I graduated on December 17th, 1965, and got married on December 26th. I wanted to be able to remember my anniversary, the day after Christmas. And so I was just out of undergraduate a few days. And then, so that's sort of the launch of my career, was working during the Apollo program, working in Huntsville, getting incredible confirmation that, yes, this is what I want to do. Every quarter I worked was just another ratchet in my passion to try to excel, and it really made me a better student because I knew what I was doing was where I wanted to go. And so, but I left NASA to go to Southern California, went to work for what was then McDonnell Douglas, which was launching satellites, unmanned satellites, but launching them very frequently, so I could get a lot of experience quickly with the physics of space flight without having to work quite as hard on worrying about how to support human life, just worry about getting satellites there. And in 4 years, I earned 2 degrees, had my our first child, and worked full time the entire time that I was in Southern California. 1 year we made 12 launches, so you can imagine my life was intense. And I graduated from UCLA in December of 1969. As you know, I'm a dinosaur. I'm happy to report that the neurons are still firing, and thank God I'm healthy. Or as my wife said, thank God you're a robust young man that you can take on this president's job. But I'm blessed in many dimensions, and I've kind of gotten a rambling talk here, but let me just come back and maybe without your questions, talk about perseverance, and I can implicitly answer a lot of your questions, so you can interrupt me anytime you want. But I think that perseverance can be bifurcated into 2 kind of contexts. If you're in the context where your very life is at stake, and put your mind in the person who was at Auschwitz, then to survive that kind of situation, perseverance is really about just your will to live, and that tenacity gets morphed into a particular context. But if you're putting it in a more traditional context where I've lived my life, that I had a lot of hardships to overcome, and I had a poor initial state by many measures. By my measures, I had an awesome initial state because I was, as I say, I was culturally rich, even though I was economically poor, and I was academically poor, actually, upon graduating from high school. But I was able to decide what I wanted. So perseverance in that context really has to do with developing an ambition about something that is really, really important and really exciting for you. Perseverance gets easier if you're doing something you love and you are working through that process. But on the other hand, to use a kind of a sports metaphor, I became a tennis fanatic for about 35 or 40 years of my life. And playing tennis is a very good metaphor for talking about what perseverance is all about. My wife had played in high school, and when I first started playing, she could spank me, even though I was a lot stronger and bigger than she was. So I didn't start playing tennis until I was 35. And I think it was about 3 years before I could take a set off my wife. It was pretty humiliating. But I decided, okay, I'm going to learn how to play this game, even though I started late in life. And in order to suffer through a lot of losing, which is an interesting problem, you have to learn to work on every time you lose, you analyze the mistakes you're making and the parts of your game that are weak, and you go to work on those. So, and that if you're doing something technical, if you're doing anything, you need to work on, okay, if I'm going to be an aerospace engineer, I think I really need to understand calculus and differential equations and linear algebra and computing, all those things. I need to go work on those fundamentals. And if you work on those fundamentals and you develop first of all, usually some intermediate milestones that you're trying to achieve, and you analyze your progress and you take joy in making progress, it's different from taking the joy in the final reaching your destination. You take pleasure, and when I was playing tennis, every time I hit a great topspin forehand, it was just awesome. I may get the crap beat out of me in that set I'm playing, but I said, wow, okay, I was making a lot of mistakes, but that forehand was working today, and I loved it. It's a great feeling. So you take joy in the fine structure of your discipline, the things you're doing well, criticize the things you need to do better on, and just take that kind of a problem-solving attitude. But your mindset, I've had several. I played at one point where I was good enough to get beat by the best people in town frequently. But I usually was not depressed after I lost a tennis match because there'd be some things I did well. And okay, this person was a great player. I got beat 6-love, 6-1, but I played some pretty good tennis. And, he just beat me. He's better than I am. Anyway, so you could still enjoy what you're doing in a recreational sense, but the same professionally. You can enjoy what you're doing and so make your tenacity be associated with having some realistic expectations for progress and trying to achieve those or exceed those. And so you work on your game and you enjoy the fundamentals of the game. And if you don't, you're in the wrong business. You need to go to something you love. Because whatever you're doing, having long-term success has to do with being realistic and how you're grading yourself. And if you're doing poorly, then say, why am I doing poorly? And is it really important to me to solve this problem? Well, yeah, I'll go pay my dues. I remember I did something else, another sports metaphor. In addition to playing football in high school, I was also a track and field person. And at that time, I looked more like a football player than I did a pole vaulter, which I decided I wanted to do. And God did not have that in his plans for me because my body was built more like somebody that ought to be throwing the javelin or the discus. And I wasn't especially fast and I wasn't super well coordinated, but I wanted to pole vault. And the coach waved me off when I first said I wanted to do this. He said, no way you're going to do this. I'm going to do this, coach. I'm going to find out if I can do it. I'm fascinated by it. And so I started trying to learn to vault, and I couldn't even clear the qualifying heights the first year, and I could barely clear the first opening height the second year. But in my senior year, I set the regional record and got fourth in state. Because I got everything that was in my body on that. I just decided I wanted to figure out how to do that. And I spent a lot of time conditioning and studying. Then we didn't have YouTube, but I could get real film of the great vaulters in the world and study their technique and say, I can't get that perfectly, but I'm going to get as close as I can to it. So basically become a student of the game of whatever you're doing that you put your passions into. And sometimes, even though if you put it in an intellectual space, you may not be as bright as somebody that is in your field. But if you study the subject matter and see what it is that you're missing and where are you not having the insights and what are the skill sets you're missing, there's something to be said to being an overachiever, and I am an overachiever. But having that kind of ambition is important. The final thing that I came to realize in perseverance, academically speaking, and academics, and when you've worked as I have for over 50 years as a professor, you begin to want your life to matter. And just being recognized as good as in your field, for me, wasn't enough. So it caused several things to happen. Just saying, hey, I've been at this a long time and I want to make a mark that is going to last. And I have been producing a lot of good students along the way. And I began to think about it. I said, my God, I've got 3 generations of PhDs. This is around when I was a young man, around age 60. I began to look at, okay, I got 3 generations of PhDs. And if I sum up all of their work and compare it to what I personally can get done, even with my current graduate students, they're producing about 10 times as much volume of results, and they're extending a lot of things that they learn from me, and I have to work hard to understand their extensions. I said, my God, the most important thing that I have done, and second place isn't even close, is the people that I have mentored. And so I came then to say, wait a minute, the ultimate repository of research knowledge is not a paper or a book. It's somebody that collaborated with me that probably understands it better than I can possibly document in a paper or a book, and that they're passionate about it, and they're going to build a career around it. And so I really started the last 15 years, I've worked harder at mentoring. I was already a good mentor, but I really made it what I'm doing. And it's the payoff, both for me and for them. I have a former student that I spent an hour with yesterday in Canterbury, New Zealand. Working, it happens to be a woman named Robin Willens, who's a brilliant student. She won the dissertation award here at Texas A&M a few years back. But having people and recognizing, not just because you like them and they're your technical son or daughter, but recognizing that really is how I really changed the world after I'm no longer here. So that's really important. And so that, to me, perseverance and the great beyond after I'm no longer here is all about the investment that I have made both in the books and papers, but even more so in the people that have been produced as a part of my legacy here. And so again, we're rotating back, getting your mind right, which has actually happened in stages. in my career, I've always enjoyed working with people, but I didn't really begin to value them for a selfish reason that I wanted to have the legacy until later in life. And I want to share one other thing with you. One of the folk theorems of dying is that there has never been a hearse towing a U-Haul full of money. That hasn't happened. And this Institute for Advanced Study I was trying to build early on, I was having a lot of trouble raising money. And so my wife and I decided to leave our estate to the Institute for Advanced Study, to the foundation for the Institute for Advanced Study. And that turned out to be kind of turned out to be an easy decision in the end. Even though I have no plans of leaving this planet anytime soon. But writing a posthumous check, I strongly recommend it. It's very important because if you're leaving enough money to your children to tell them you love them and your grandchildren, beyond that, you want to decide what's important in your life. And do it early, do it a long time before you're on your deathbed, because it actually, we did that about 10 years ago, and it just really feels right because that, the other thing is 5 other faculty members joined me without being asked. And beyond that, even more important, I've raised $40 million and I've never asked anybody for a nickel. How can that be possible? The foundation gave me the philanthropy award because of the money that I raised, but they said, well, how did you do that without ever asking people for money? And well, I cheated legally. I formed an advisory board and I invited several people that I had carefully vetted that they satisfy at least 3 fundamental necessary conditions. Number 1, they love Texas A&M. Number 2, they love to move the excellence needle on Texas A&M. And number 3, they have deep pockets. Those are 3 very important necessary conditions. And John Hagler was one person that I had known a long time, and he and several other individuals on my advisory board got an annual report card of how the Institute is doing and what is on our wish list that we can't do because of resources, and also how can we make this Institute permanent. And he came to my office one day when he was visiting College Station and said he wanted to compare his spreadsheet with mine on the budget. And he got through comparing and he said, well, I'm very disappointed. And my heart sank. I said, my God, how can you be disappointed? I have given everything I've got and then some to make this thing work. And he said, 20 million isn't enough, is it? I cried. Anyway, but I think the idea is when you have a commanding idea and you personally commit to it, it has a lot of impact.
I think leading by example is everything. And obviously you've done that your whole entire life and continue to do. And that's the most powerful example and the best answer when people ask you, how could you possibly do that? I think people want to do as they see others do. It's about action rather than just speaking. So thank you for everything you've done, Dr. Junkins, and everything you continue to do. It is so incredibly impressive, all the things that you've shared with us today. And if we had the time, we'd certainly go on forever in every avenue of your incredible life. But I do have a question of you.
Okay.
As you've created your own your own institute, and you bring together all of the mentors that others wish for in the world if they had access. Is there still someone out there in the world that you wish you had access to, but you haven't yourself had the opportunity to maybe have into your life, provide you something, some knowledge, or even some sort of mentorship yourself? And
That's
who would that person be?
that's very interesting. Unfortunately, I missed the chance to do that because my idol passed away a few years ago. There was a fellow named Richard Battin, Battin. He was I collaborated with him on several occasions by long distance and see him at conferences but he was the person who did the guidance algorithms for the Apollo program. There was a contract from NASA to him. He was part of what's called the MIT Instrumentation Labs. Now it's Draper Laboratory, but he did that. And so he had a similar stance to me in terms of developing people and trying to do things that matter, and also having a ability to do basic and applied research. So he could tackle a basic problem, but have a single-digit number of year horizon. So his mentality was very similar to mine. He's a little bit brighter than I am, but so I wanted him here to get some of his intellectual horsepower to come to bear with me and team with me. But didn't get a chance to do that before he passed away. So, but anyway, you get to see a grown man cry here. Sorry.
I think that just shows your strength rather than anything lesser.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Valerie. It's been a very enjoyable time. I think these things that we're talking about are important issues, and I think the over-the-top approach that I take to academics and the effort that I put into the Institute for Advanced Study is probably the reason that the chancellor imposed on me to do this job, because when he called me to ask me to be the interim president, I said, "John, what are you smoking?" I said, "The largest research team that I've ever supervised has about 25 or 30 people in it. I have never aspired to be a department head or dean or to lead a large organization. I've aspired to be Professor John and to build this Institute for Advanced Study." And he said, the most important thing that I'm looking for is someone that, number one, the faculty will respect, and number two, will bring the value system that I think Texas A&M needs at this point in time. And he said, and thirdly, you're a rocket scientist. You'll figure out the stuff you don't know. You'll make it happen. He had a lot more confidence than I did because I've never delegated to 17 vice presidents before whose portfolios were already bigger than the one that I was leading at the Institute for Advanced Study in terms of dollars and people. So there's been a huge learning curve. I just got back from Austin yesterday, and I think I successfully defended our budget. So I have been learning a lot and trying to at least get a B+ on all of these leadership functions that came with this job. It's been very painful for me because I had to delegate a lot of things at the Institute that I was wanting to do personally to keep it afloat. And so I'll have to scramble this summer to recover. My graduate students are on lab support right now because I'm spending about 45 minutes apiece with these students, and it's really very difficult for me I have 6 grad students who are working on dissertations, so I'm having to timeshare at a level that these bags under my eyes aren't normally here. But I'm normally a really good-looking guy. You wouldn't believe it, but anyway, you'll deal with my humor or not. But anyway, this job is consuming me right now, but I will use all of my energy to make it come through spring in good shape and make a handoff to the next great president of this university. But this is in one sense the ultimate service role, but my pride and joy will be the Institute for Advanced Studies when I get back to it, but I will not shortchange this job this spring. I'm making sure that I don't fail to invest the effort that's appropriate. If I can figure it out, it'll happen this spring. I've had a lot of crazy challenges that I never anticipated, but we're dealing with them as best we can. I never knew this university had 800 buildings until 125 of them sprung a leak last week. It's been an insane period of 2 nights. I did not go to sleep because we had to organize a brigade with 800 buildings. Every floor of every building was walked at a 2-hour interval by students and the cadet corps with cell phones to help us find the problems and prioritize to respond as best we can, because at one point we lost, before we recovered, we lost 2/3 of the water in the water towers to leaks. Brown building got all 7 floors wet. We just had a big mess, and we're about to lose all our drinking water, and this would have been a much bigger tragedy for us until we figured out that we have got to, these buildings aren't winterized, and we have to use human capital to go find problems as soon as they happen and get on it. So we had an emergency response team here that was awesome, but I personally was consumed by that, doing things I don't normally do for a living. But there's other duties unassigned that come with these emergency situations, and I was very pleased that we made Reed Arena into a warming center for the community, because a lot of people in house trailers in Bryan were freezing to death. So we did some things that in that space that we should do as good citizens of the community. So I think I was satisfied. I wasn't elated with our response, but I felt we weren't short on effort on a lot of people to do some things that we might have been able to do some of them a little better, but we did the best we could with what information we had available to get after this problem. But it's wonderful in one sense to see that level of response that we were able to get on short notice to minimize the problem that we had here in College Station. Anyway, great talking to all you, and I sorry I didn't let you ask your questions, but hopefully this rambling discussion gave you much of what you were looking for. If it didn't, you can come again and we'll talk some more.
Thank you very much.
This was absolutely outstanding, Dr. Junkins. So really appreciate your time, and you absolutely hit all the highlights that we hope to get out of these types of interviews. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time very much.
All right, goodbye.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. The Nuclear Power Institute is a joint center with Texas A&M University and the Texas A&M Engineering Experiment Station, and is a component of the Nuclear Engineering and Science Center. For more information about our center or about our guest speaker today, please visit our website at npi.tamu.edu and look for us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you.